let's go all the way back and listen to what has upset so many elites in America. Whenever, in any era, black leaders, activists, or artists confront the system. We can go all the way back to 1939 when a 23-year-old Billie Holiday tackled lynching in Strange Fruit, adapted from a poem by a labor organizer. Or Gil Scott-Heron rebuking foreign policy towards apartheid in the song Johannesburg, and taking on Nixon for pushing no-knock warrants all the way back in 1971 with a song that was essentially also journalism, because Mr. Heron was reporting on how those new warrants would be used for raids largely targeting black Americans. It's the same tactic that led to the police killing Breonna Taylor in her sleep.
We want to do a poem for one of our unfavored people, who's now the head of the Nixon campaign. He's no knock, the law in particular. The authorities and members of the police force no longer have to knock on your door before entering. No knocking, head rocking, into shocking, shooting, cussing, killing, crying, lying, and being white.
Those poets were capturing real life in America, from work and love to policing and systemic racism. They built a path for the next generation of poets, also known as rappers, like Dr. Dre, leading NWA's aggressive song that condemned how police think they have the authority to kill a minority. Black artists exercising their free speech rights, that every person is supposed to have in this country. And I just showed you across different decades. What was the response? Black artists condemning police brutality and repression? They were met with more brutality and government repression. And you could turn away from these facts. If you're watching this report in America live or on the internet and you live in America, this is being done in your name. You should know about it. And we do facts around here, so let me walk you through briefly the results for each of those artists. Billie Holiday, she died at 44 years old in a hospital as police were handcuffing her to the hospital bed over drug allegations, measures deemed so cruel that even in 1959, a judge ultimately ordered those police removed from her room on an emergency basis. It was hours before her death. For Sam Cooke, some change did come, but not in time for him to see it. Protesters were marching with signs quoting his lyrics. Congress did pass the Voting Rights Act in 1964, but Cooke was dead at 33. He was killed in a controversial shooting by a hotel manager who was then cleared. It was deemed a justifiable homicide by a jury that deliberated for just 15 minutes. Gil Scott-Heron was older, a celebrated musician, when a judge sentenced him to 1 to 3 years in prison for personal drug use by a 52-year-old, far harsher than what white drug users, who are often spared any jail time, ever face. The backlash also targets art itself. That F the Police song, which I showed you, discussed specifically police brutality. It was attacked by politicians. It was targeted for radio bans, kind of like an audio book burning. The FBI was pressuring the record company, saying it opposed that song's message and disrespect. This was all stoking a frenzy of a kind of mob antipathy to this entire art form. Here in this supposedly free speech country, we're witnessing those efforts to literally criminalize the music. There were DJs indicted on racketeering charges for, I guess, dealing music. Some of them actually beat those cases. The authorities were trying to turn poetry and dissent into kind of a hated contraband. And it was worse on the political right. I showed you those clips. But the thrust of this was bipartisan, just like so much of America's drug war and policing of minority communities that we have reported on for you here. The hysteria started to drive black art and dissent up to a kind of a supposedly presidential level problem. I want you to listen to this. Consider the kind of indulgent blindness it took Bill Clinton to seriously compare a Klan leader, David Duke, to the poet, author, and rapper, Sister Souljah.
A line has been crossed, not just of taste, but of human dignity and decency.
The kind of hatred that you do not honor today.
from songs about killing policemen and rejecting law.
If you took the words white and black and you reversed them, you might think David Duke was giving that speech.
Might you? Presidents versus poets. The FBI versus a CD. Police force in America versus words. Why? Because the poets and the words were depicting racism and reporting brutality and exposing hypocrisy that America doesn't want to hear. Now, certain people may object, but Ari, that was a long time ago. Certain people do that a lot. You show them these problems and they claim the problems they're located some other place or area. That's not here, they'll say. That's not us. So maybe that was back then, or it's over there, but not now. No. It is right now. The history just helps show what's happening. But this ain't cable history. You're watching cable news. The news tonight is this playbook continues now.
It's not actually a form of music.
Walking around with his pants around his ass, they have encouraged people to be so different from the mainstream that they can't participate.
I had no idea what drill rapping was. We are allowing music, displaying of guns, violence. It is alarming.
Americans.
Right.
Are upset, annoyed, and looking for answers that a guy like Common would be entertained at the White House.
Prosecutors in Georgia will use art as criminal evidence in an upcoming trial.
This is why I say that hip-hop has done more damage to young African Americans than racism in recent years.
That is all right now. And those were people on the right and the Democratic left or center. So some people clearly did not learn Bob Dylan's admonition from back in 1964. Don't criticize what you don't understand. Now, we showed you how leaders in both parties have led these kind of attacks. Right now, Atlanta prosecutors are treating poetry as criminal evidence against two black artists who are legally presumed innocent, but they're in prison right now tonight. That's before their trial, in a RICO case that cites their lyrics 11 times as supposed criminal evidence. Now, that's striking because white artists on trial for violence don't ever see their art held against them in court, from Johnny Cash, who had several arrests back in the day, to just this year, Johnny Depp. And all of that brings us back to Jay-Z, tackling injustice in this new song we reported on, as well as history in this new interview.
You got to remember, hip-hop was demonized when we first came out. After they couldn't get rid of us, they demonized us, and they start like driving tractors over our CDs and things like that. This is all history.
History, as we showed you. And people are listening right now. That Drug War song is the title track on what is right now the #1 album in the country. News, if you want to know what people are listening to and what is resonating. Now, tonight, I can tell you art and news are intersecting, because in that same new interview with Rob Markman, Jay-Z cites that MSNBC beat report that we did about the song. So I want to play this for you. Here's Jay discussing our beat report and then briefly my response to him in this new online discussion.
Ari, that was an amazing piece. In the verse, I say, my only goal is to make a real feel seen. When somebody break it down in that way, we all feel seen. And it wasn't me. I got calls from everybody like, man, we needed that right there, or that was amazing. To articulate and understand what we're going through, So that was an amazing job.
And I've been listening to you guys my whole life. Your work and the work of hip-hop artists who've explained the real stories and history that wasn't always in the history books is why I did civil rights law, and then now I do journalism. Not all history is in the history books they give you. Now, Jay-Z also released that beat report as a new track. Hove did, citing his own nickname. It's kind of like a single or an audio book. Jay-Z's basically distributing the MSNBC segment as a track for his fans across music platforms, Spotify, Apple, Tidal, which has made headlines you see here because, as best we can tell, that is a first. One might even say, Jay sampled my voice and made it a hot song. I mean, one might say that because that's a quote. But the larger story here is about truths long denied. How a nation so insistent that it is the land of the free, as Jay once wrote, is actually a place where so many remain enslaved. Now, the truth has no politics. The truth has no ideology. When you deal with the truth, your lived experience or knowledge built up through sources and information, it should just hit as true. But let me tell you something. In repressive societies, telling the truth can become a radical act. And you see how they treat the so-called radicals. But the truth is attainable. The knowledge is here if you want it bad enough. As Jay-Z also said, I'll answer all your questions, but then y'all got to go. The question I ask you is, how bad you want to know? Do you want to know what's going on in our country and what's been going on this whole time? Or is it just easier to be ignorant of our history and our reality today? That kind of ignorance is what helps history repeat itself. But it is not inevitable. This is history right now. What we do today will become tomorrow's history. And as you see, if you learn it, with effort, we can change history. Sam did. Gil did. Hove did. They did.
It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die.